And when I write something based on personal experience, I like to write it in the third person sometimes because it just kind of puts a little distance between me and the event. So it makes it more like fiction. We're trying to write fiction here. There's nothing wrong with personal narratives, but fiction is creating something out of nothing. And so that's why I kind of think it's better to write in third person if it's based on something that really happened. This one is called Lessons Learned from an Ex-Con. When he first left his family home at the age of 18, Sam Miller's mom gave him one bit of advice. "You're on your own now. It's a big deal, isn't it? I hope you write a diary," she added, "so you can look back later when you get old, and otherwise you're likely to forget about those first steps." And here it was in his hand, dug out from a box of books that he'd read back in those years. Walden Pond, Trout Fishing in America, The Teachings of Don Juan, 100 Years of Solitude. His diary was at the bottom of the box. He'd forgotten that he had actually written the thing that was supposed to help him remember things. His mother was long gone, but the place was still there, the place where he'd gone with his high school buddy named Jim Brock. Brock had some sort of connection in Mammoth Lakes, a ski resort high in California's Sierra Nevada mountains, about a 6-hour drive northeast from Los Angeles. For Sam and Brock, puttering along in Sam's VW microbus with a misfiring cylinder, it was more like 8 or 9 or 10 hours. Sam was now driving a late model Toyota. It was summer, and he had a week to kill. He decided to go up to Mammoth just for old time's sake. Why not? So here he was in the Motel 6, which he believed was right across the street from where he'd worked as a busboy. It was hard to tell. If he was right, the Motel 6 was in the same place as the cocktail lounge used to be, named the Squirrel Nut. He stood outside his room on the veranda of the Motel 6 and looked over across the highway to where the Arlberg Inn had been. He'd gotten a job with the help of Brock's connections as a busboy at the Arlberg. It was winter back then, ski season, and somehow Sam had managed to save enough wages and tips to get a season pass, and he'd gone skiing almost every day. As he remembered, there was a long driveway that ran alongside the Arlberg to the parking lot and back. Across that driveway had been, on the first floor, a little Mexican restaurant called Paco's Tacos. It had been a startup, opened, leased, and operated by a short, stocky Mexican named, what else? Paco. He and Brock shared a room on the second floor, above Paco's place, in a dormitory that everybody called the Fun House. The name had been given to the double row of single rooms connected by a dimly lit hallway the year before. That year had been a record snowfall. Drifts up to 30 feet deep had blocked the roads, cut power lines. The town was pretty much shut down for a while. What did the denizens of the funhouse do in the meantime? They had fun. Now, as he looked at the place, he was pretty sure it was the same spot. He was looking at a shopping plaza. He tried to recognize the towering cluster of pine and fir trees in the background. Trees were still there, but now he looked at a Dunkin' Donuts, a 7-Eleven, a Radio Shack. The places he was trying to remember, the Arlberg, Paco's Tacos, the Fun House, the Squirrel Nut, too. They'd all been franchised out of existence. He thought back to some of those characters he'd known when he and Brock lived in the Fun House. Drugs were everywhere. He remembered a pretty dark Patty, who favored psilocybin, the psychedelic mushroom. She had a boyfriend, Mark, who'd just come back from Vietnam. Sam had listened carefully to Mark's story of how he'd shared a hooch with a Vietnamese family while he was AWOL. Then he'd gotten a dishonorable discharge from the Army. There was a strange fellow nicknamed the Relator, because he was always high on LSD and going around saying, "I can relate to that." Marijuana smoke filled the hallway at the fun house, and Sam recalled a guy named Bobby, just a couple years older than Sam, but much more worldly. Bobby's favorite was Seconal, formerly known as Reds. Bobby. He went back into his room and thumbed through his diary. Something had jolted loose a memory, something about Bobby, and he found it. Here's what Sam wrote in his diary all those years ago. Bobby asked me today if I remembered a guy who came into the Arlberg a couple of nights ago. The guy was tall, had short hair, his girlfriend was with him. Yeah, I remember, I said. Bobby told me I was lucky to be alive. Why, I asked. He wanted to kill you. I remembered the guy and his girlfriend because I was walking around trying to look busy, filling water glasses and picking up empty plates. There was an empty plate on this guy's table, and I started to pick it up. Leave it there, he told me. I picked it up anyway. Put it back. His girlfriend smiled at me as though I was doing the right thing. I started to walk away with the empty plate. The man said quietly, but it sounded serious, "Put it back on the table." I put it back and looked at the guy. He looked back at me with a pair of eyes like I'd never seen before. Very scary, like he could somehow reach out with those eyes and rip out my throat. That's why I remembered him. Bobby told me the man had just gotten out of prison. He didn't say what for or how long, and he was taking his girlfriend out for the first time since he'd been cut loose. Bobby told me I better stay clear of that man. If you see him coming, you better run, he told me. Sam, as he sat in the room at the Motel 6, could suddenly recognize what the ex-con's problem, or rather, the long ago Sam's problem, was. At the time, he remembered thinking, okay, I'll just steer clear of Mr. Badass. He's all messed up from prison and probably learned some nasty habits. Sam saw a human side now. A guy that's been in prison gets out. Does he have any money? Not likely. The Arlberg was a pricey place. It specialized in high-quality steaks, lobster, exotic dishes cooked up by a chef who'd been recruited from Los Angeles. How could an almost broke ex-con take out his girlfriend to a fancy place like that? By splitting it. That's why there was an extra plate. He wanted to take his girl, who'd likely had waited for him to serve his time, order a thick steak with a bottle of Pinot Noir, and share it with her. A lady and the tramp-like romantic dinner. Then along comes this klutzy moron of a busboy and messes up the whole thing. The ex-con's pride was severely damaged. Not wanting to advertise that he's short of cash, an idiot busboy has to announce it to the world. Sam's question for himself was, if he had known that the man had just gotten out of prison, would he have been the wiser? Would he have pretended he didn't notice the empty plate? He thought to himself, I was a dumb kid back then. Thumbing the pages of his diary, I probably would have done the same thing. Sam touched his throat with his fingers, gingerly feeling around his Adam's apple. The hollow spot just beneath the Adam's apple, the tendons that ran just beneath his skin. He could feel the artery. Thump, thump. He held his hand there for a moment, remembering the sharp look in the ex-con's eyes, what Bobby had told him, and thinking that, shit, I guess I'm lucky to be here.